The wind clawed at Lena Carter's coat as if trying to tear her off the frozen sidewalk. The December night was merciless, the kind that sliced through fabric and skin, the kind that made even the streetlights shiver. The city was silent, except for the low hum of traffic blocks away and the crunch of snow beneath her shoes. Her feet ached from 12 hours on shift at St. Mary's Care Home, where she'd spent the day washing bedpans, changing dressings, and pretending exhaustion didn't exist. Her fingertips were raw, her body hollow, but she kept walking. Rent was due tomorrow. Hunger could wait. She cut through the alley behind the diner like she always did, a shortcut between two brick walls that smelled of grease and old cigarettes. But tonight something felt wrong. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. Halfway down the alley, she almost tripped. At first, she thought it was a pile of garbage bags, until her eyes caught the shimmer of something expensive, a dark wool coat, a glint of silver. She crouched down. Beneath the coat was a boy, maybe 14. His hair was damp with melting snow, his face pale as the ice around him. Her pulse quickened. "Hey," she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. His breathing was shallow, his lips tinged blue. Training took over. She tilted his chin, checked for pulse. Weak, but there. She patted down his coat, searching for a wallet, an ID, anything. Her hand closed around a sleek smartphone in a leather case that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She pressed the power button. The lock screen glowed softly in the dark, showing one emergency contact. Just one word. Dad. Her stomach tightened. Whoever Dad was, he wasn't someone who lived in her part of town. Still, the boy was dying out here, and she couldn't just walk away. She hit the number and pressed the phone to her ear. The line clicked after a single ring. A man's voice, low and controlled, filled the silence. "Who are you? Where is my son?" Lena swallowed. I found him collapsed in an alley near Franklin Avenue. He's breathing, but he's cold and unresponsive. I think he... Do not move him." The man's voice was sharp, commanding. "Do not call anyone else. I'm on my way." The call ended. No questions. No thank you. Just orders. Lena stared at the phone, a chill crawling up her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Who was this man? What kind of father tells a stranger not to call an ambulance? Minutes dragged. Snowflakes drifted down in lazy spirals, settling on the boy's lashes. Lena shrugged off her coat and laid it over him. "Hang on, kid," she whispered. "Help's coming." Then she heard it. A low growl of engines in the distance, growing louder, closer. Black SUVs slid into the alley like shadows come to life, tires whispering against the snow. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. Men in black stepped out, moving with practiced precision. Guns glinted under their jackets. Lena's breath caught. This wasn't an ambulance. A man emerged last, taller than the rest, his presence commanding without a word. He wore a tailored overcoat, his dark hair slicked back, eyes cold and unreadable. Even from a distance she could feel it, the weight of authority, of danger. He knelt beside the boy, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. "Eli," he murmured, his tone softening just slightly. Then he turned his gaze to her. It hit like a physical force. "You called me." Lena nodded, her heart pounding. "He was freezing. I thought he was—" "You did right," he interrupted. His voice was smooth but unnerving, like a blade wrapped in silk. He pulled a small kit from his coat pocket, his movements precise, deliberate. A moment later, he injected something into the boy's arm. "Type 1 diabetes," he said quietly, almost to himself. He forgot his medication again. The boy's color began to return, faintly pink beneath the pallor. His eyelids fluttered. "Dad?" he whispered weakly. "I'm here," the man said, steady but clipped. He turned to Lena again, studying her face as if committing it to memory. "You stayed with him." "I couldn't just leave," she said. For the first time, his expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been gratitude or maybe calculation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black card, the edges embossed in silver. Call this number tomorrow morning, he said. I have a proposition. Lena didn't take it. I don't want a reward, she said, voice trembling. It's not a reward, he replied. It's an opportunity. He slipped the card into her pocket himself, then nodded to his men. They lifted the boy carefully and guided him into one of the SUVs. Within seconds, the alley was empty again. Only tire tracks and silence remained. Lena stood frozen, her coat gone, her breath fogging the air. The card in her pocket felt heavier than anything she'd ever held. She stared down the dark alley, her pulse still echoing in her ears. She had no way of knowing that the man she'd just met was Damien Voss, one of the most dangerous men in the city, and that one phone call had just changed her life forever. The morning light crept through the blinds of Lena's tiny apartment, painting stripes of pale gold across her cracked walls. She hadn't slept. The business card lay on her table like something alive, gleaming silver against the cheap wood. It wasn't a normal card. No name, no title, just a number. Her mind had turned it over all night, a storm of fear and curiosity twisting inside her. Who was that man? And why had his presence felt so powerful, so dangerous, yet strangely protective? By the time the clock hit 9, her trembling hands picked up the phone. The line clicked once. A calm female voice answered immediately, smooth and efficient. Miss Carter, please arrive at this address in 2 hours. Bring identifique. Tian. No questions were asked. No explanation given. The call ended before Lena could even respond. She stared at the silent phone. Every part of her screamed not to go. But something deeper, something that whispered of fate, pushed her forward. The taxi ride felt endless. The city transformed as it moved north. Graffiti-stained walls turned to glass towers, potholes to marble driveways. Then she saw it. The mansion. Iron gates taller than her apartment building opened without a sound. Inside was another world, untouched by noise or poverty. Manicured gardens dusted with frost. A fountain frozen mid-splash. The car stopped at the entrance where a man in a black coat stood waiting. He said nothing, only motioned for her to follow. The doors opened to silence and grandeur. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, a smell of polish and power. Her boots squeaked on the marble floor as she followed down a long corridor lined with old portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her. At the end stood a massive door slightly ajar, and behind it, a voice. Low, commanding, familiar. Enter. Lena stepped inside. The study was larger than her entire apartment, walls lined with dark wood and shelves of books bound in leather. Behind a desk sat the man from the alley, Damien Voss. He looked different in daylight, sharper, colder, but no less magnetic. His gaze lifted from a folder. Miss Carter. Her throat went dry. She managed a nod. Thank you for coming, he said. My son is stable. Because of you. She tried to smile, but his eyes stopped her. They were too piercing, too unreadable. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit. She obeyed. He folded his hands, every movement controlled. My son, Eli, has a chronic medical condition. His safety is my highest priority. His last caretaker left without notice. I need someone who can manage his health discreetly, live in, full-time. You have the training. You have proven your loyalty. Lena blinked, stunned. You want me to live here? To take care of him? He nodded once. The salary he named made her heart stutter. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of earning. Enough to pay her debts, enough to change everything. Yet beneath the offer, something felt off. Too generous, too sudden. Why me? She asked softly. Because you did not ask who I am, he said, leaning back. Most people would have. You saw my son, not my name. That makes you rare. Before she could reply, the door burst open. A boy's voice cut through the tension. I told you I don't need another babysitter. Eli stood there, alive and defiant, eyes flashing. He was pale but strong, dressed in designer clothes that didn't hide the bruises of sleepless nights. Damien's jaw tightened. 3 incidents this month, he said quietly. Last night could have been your last. Eli glared at Lena like she was part of the problem. Great, he said. Another stranger spying on me. Lena rose, meeting his glare calmly. I'm not here to spy, she said. I'm here to help you stay alive. Something in her tone made the boy pause. For a moment, the arrogance faded, replaced by confusion. Damien watched in silence, something flickering behind his cold mask. When Eli stormed out, the room fell quiet again. Damien's voice softened almost imperceptibly. He lost his mother 3 years ago. Since then, his control over his illness has declined. He trusts no one. Lena's heart tightened. I'll do my best, she said. He stood and moved closer, the air around him heavy with unspoken warning. One more thing, Miss Carter. You may hear things, see things. My business is complex. Discretion is not optional. It is survival. The words hung in the air like a blade. She nodded slowly. I understand. He studied her face for a long moment, then turned away. Good. You start tomorrow. Mrs. Chen will prepare your room. Welcome to my home, Miss Carter. As she left the study, her pulse echoed in her ears. From the hallway, she glanced back once. Damien was still standing by the window, watching the snow fall beyond the iron gates. His reflection in the glass looked less like a man and more like a shadow. That night, lying awake in her small apartment, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far larger than a job. It wasn't a house she was entering. It was a world built on silence and secrets, and once inside, there would be no way out. The following morning began with a heavy gray sky that pressed low over the city, as if warning Lena Carter that nothing about this new life would ever be ordinary again. The driver who came for her didn't speak a word during the ride. The car glided past the iron gates and rolled to a stop before the mansion's grand entrance. As soon as she stepped out, the cold air bit at her skin, and a strange stillness settled inside her chest. Somewhere deep down, she already knew she was crossing an invisible line between safety and danger. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, greeted her with the quiet efficiency of someone who had served the family for years. She led Lena through marble corridors where polished floors reflected her every uncertain step. Everything smelled of wealth and distance, like a museum of people who didn't know warmth anymore. Mrs. Chen spoke softly, almost as if afraid the walls could hear. Mr. Voss values order above all else, she said. Meals are punctual. Rooms off limits are locked for a reason. They passed portraits of ancestors in gold frames, faces too serious to be comforting. When they reached the east wing, Mrs. Chen opened a door revealing a suite larger than Lena's entire apartment building floor. Fresh flowers, silk curtains, a view of the frozen gardens. It looked beautiful but empty, like a cage made of glass. Your uniform and identification have been arranged, Mrs. Chen said, placing a folded stack of clothing on the bed before leaving her alone. An hour later, a knock came at the door. It was Eli. He stood there with his hands stuffed into his pockets, his expression a mix of defiance and curiosity. Dad says you're my new shadow, he muttered. I don't need one. Lena smiled gently. Then pretend I'm not here, she said. Her calmness disarmed him. For a boy who had grown up surrounded by power, he didn't seem dangerous, only lonely. She followed him to the study room, where books and expensive gadgets were scattered across the desk. Halfway through their awkward silence, Eli's glucose monitor beeped softly. He ignored it. Lena noticed immediately and moved toward him. You're dropping fast, she said. His eyes widened. How can you tell? She shrugged. I've seen that color before. It's the kind that makes doctors panic. He let out a reluctant laugh and reached for his glucose tablets. You really are a nurse, she smiled faintly. Not yet. Still learning. Later that evening, while she checked the medical supplies in the living room cabinet, she overheard low voices from the next room. The tone was sharp, filled with restrained anger. Damien's voice was unmistakable. You told me the shipment would arrive tonight, he said. The reply came from a man she hadn't seen before. The Donovans intercepted it. We think they have a mole inside your transport line. Lena froze. Every instinct screamed to back away, but curiosity rooted her in place. The Donovans. She remembered that name from the whispers she'd heard at the diner months ago, always spoken with fear. A family that owned half the city's docks and none of its mercy. When she stepped back into the hall, Damien appeared in front of her without warning. His presence filled the space, cold and quiet. "Listening at doors is dangerous in this house, Miss Carter," he said. His eyes searched hers for defiance but found something else instead, genuine fear. "I wasn't listening," she said quickly. "I just heard voices." He studied her for a long moment, then turned away. "Go check on Eli. He's due for another glucose reading." That night, as the mansion settled into silence, Lena lay awake in her new bed, staring at the ceiling. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking of the old clock, the creak of footsteps somewhere down the hall. She rose and peeked through the curtains. 2 men patrolled the gardens with earpieces and flashlights, moving like soldiers. Her phone buzzed suddenly. An unknown number. The message was short. "You shouldn't have come here." Her blood ran cold. She stared at the text, heart pounding. Before she could reply, it disappeared, deleted as if it had never existed. The door to her room creaked open. Damien stood there, his face half hidden by the dim light from the corridor. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "Lock your door when you sleep." The way he said it made her wonder if he was reassuring her or warning her. When the door closed again, Lena pressed her back against the wall, the phone clutched in her hand. She realized that safety inside this house was only an illusion. She had entered a world where kindness was currency, trust was a weapon, and secrets had sharp edges. And though she didn't know it yet, the first crack in Damien Voss's guarded empire had already formed the moment he let her walk through that door. Snow fell over the Voss mansion like a veil, soft and silent, hiding the tension that pulsed beneath its elegant surface. Days had passed since the mysterious text, but Lena couldn't forget it. Every shadow seemed to whisper. Every creak of the old floors sounded like footsteps. She had learned the rhythms of the house by now. Damien left at dawn and returned long after midnight. His son tried to act fearless but flinched at every car that slowed near the gates. The staff moved with quiet precision, loyal but cautious, like people who had seen too much and learned to stay silent. That morning, Lena followed her routine with deliberate calm. She checked Eli's glucose monitor, prepared his breakfast, and pretended not to notice the 2 security men stationed at every corner of the room. The boy's usual sarcasm was gone. He was pale, restless. "Dad's been on the phone all night," he muttered. "When that happens, something bad's coming." She frowned. "You mean business problems?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "That's one word for it." The sound of engines outside cut through the stillness. Through the window, Lena saw 3 black cars rolling up the long drive, tires crunching through the snow. Her stomach twisted. Damien's men stiffened. One of them whispered into his earpiece, "Mr. Voss, they're here." The doors opened moments later. Damien entered the dining hall flanked by 2 guards, his presence commanding the room instantly. He looked different today, dressed in a dark suit without a coat, his expression carved from ice. The air around him carried tension like static before a storm. He glanced at Eli, then at Lena. "There's a meeting in the East Wing. You'll stay with my son until I return." His tone was final, not a request. Then he turned and disappeared down the corridor. But curiosity had always been Lena's weakness. When the guards moved out of sight, she led Eli toward the study, pretending to look for a book. Voices drifted from the closed door nearby. Damien's voice, low but sharp. "You come into my house uninvited and talk about peace?" Another man's reply followed, smoother but dripping with menace. "You know what we want, Voss. Control of the South Docks. Your shipments have crossed the line." Lena's pulse raced. She peeked through the narrow gap in the doorway. A tall man in a gray coat stood opposite Damien. His face was familiar from the newspapers that lined the diner counter where she used to work. Michael Donovan, a businessman with a smile that never reached his eyes. The same family name she had heard whispered the night she first arrived. Damien moved closer to him, every step quiet and lethal. "You touch one more container that carries my mark, and you'll regret breathing my air." Donovan smiled faintly. "You sound like a man protecting more than money. Maybe you should remind your son not to wander the streets alone." The room went silent. Lena saw Damien's jaw tighten, his hand curl slightly at his side. For a second she thought he might strike him. Instead he said softly, "Leave my house." Donovan's smirk widened. He turned toward the door. As he passed, his eyes met Lena's through the gap. The smile faded. He saw her. By the time she pulled back, the door swung open. Damien stood there, eyes burning with controlled fury. "You were told to stay with my son," she stammered. "I heard shouting. I just wanted to make sure everything was all right." His voice dropped lower. "Curiosity is dangerous here, Lena. It can get you killed." That night, the storm broke over the mansion. Wind howled through the chimneys and lightning flickered across the sky. Lena couldn't sleep. She wandered to the kitchen for water, only to find Damien there, alone, sleeves rolled up, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. The light from the window made him look almost human. He didn't turn when he spoke. "You think I'm a monster, don't you?" She hesitated. "I think you're a man carrying more than one life should." He looked at her then, eyes softer, haunted. "Every decision I make, every threat I answer, it's all for him. My son is the only part of my life that's still pure. I won't lose him like I lost his mother." The pain in his voice cracked something inside her. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but before she could, the security alarm blared through the hallways. Damien's glass shattered on the floor. One of the guards rushed Ed in. "Sir, the perimeter's been breached." Donovan's men were spotted near the east wall. Damien's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The tenderness vanished, replaced by cold precision. "Get Eli to the safe room," he ordered, his gaze locked on Lena's. "Stay with him. Don't open the door for anyone unless it's me." As the guards moved, she caught a glimpse of Damien pulling a gun from the drawer beneath the counter. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Then he was gone into the storm. Lena held Eli's trembling hand as they descended into the hidden room behind the library. The steel door closed with a heavy thud, sealing them in darkness. Above, the muffled sound of gunfire tore through the night. In that moment, as fear gripped her chest, Lena understood one truth with painful clarity. She hadn't stepped into a job. She had stepped into a war, and there was no way back. The silence after gunfire was worse than the shots themselves. It pressed against Lena's eardrums until she could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her chest. The steel door to the safe room stood firm, but the sound of distant footsteps above told her the fight wasn't over. Eli sat beside her, pale but calm, in that strange way only people raised around danger could be. He whispered, "They won't get through. My dad won't let them." She wanted to believe him, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her fear. Minutes stretched like hours. The air inside the safe room was cold and dry, filled with the faint hum of the hidden ventilation system. Lena pressed her ear to the door, trying to make out voices. All she could hear was the wind outside and the occasional thud from somewhere upstairs. Then came silence, complete and consuming. The lock clicked. Lena froze. The voice that followed was low, firm, and familiar. "It's me. Open the door." It was Damien. She hesitated for a second, her mind spinning through every possibility. Could it be a trick? But Eli was already on his feet, rushing to the Anel. The door slid open and Damien stepped in, snow clinging to his coat, blood streaking his sleeve. He looked like he had fought death and won by sheer will. His eyes swept over them, sharp but tired. "It's over for now," he said. "Donovan's men are gone." Eli moved first, throwing his arms around his father. Damien stiffened for a moment before returning the embrace, his hand resting protectively on his son's back. Then his gaze found Lena. "You followed orders," he said quietly. "Most people panic." She met his eyes. "I didn't have time to panic." He gave a single nod, something like respect flickering across his face. Later that night, when the house was quiet again and the security team was sweeping the property, Lena went to check Damien's wound. He was sitting in his study, jacket off, blood drying on his forearm. When she entered, he looked up, the hardness in his expression softening slightly. "I told you to rest," he said. "You're bleeding," she replied. "I can't rest while you're pretending it's nothing." She cleaned the wound in silence, the dim light casting shadows across his face. Up close, he didn't look like the monster the city whispered about. He looked like a man held together by duty and scars. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. She asked quietly, "How many times has this happened before?" His answer was simple. Too many. When she finished bandaging him, he caught her wrist gently. You shouldn't be here, Lena. My world doesn't let people walk away untouched. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I wasn't meant to walk away. Before he could respond, the intercom buzzed sharply. One of the guards spoke through static. Sir, we caught one of Donovan's men near the perimeter. He's alive. Damien's grip tightened slightly. Bring him to the basement. I'll handle it. Lena followed as he descended the stone stairs beneath the mansion. The aide-de-camp grew colder, heavier. In the dim light of the basement, 2 guards dragged in a man bound at the wrists. His face was bruised, eyes defiant. Damien approached him with quiet precision. Tell me where Donovan is hiding. The man spat blood onto the floor. I'm not afraid of you, Voss. Damien didn't flinch. Then you're a fool. Lena wanted to look away, but couldn't. She saw the other side of him now, the one that ruled through fear, the way his voice could slice through a man more effectively than any weapon. Within minutes, the intruder broke, gasping out an address near the docks. Damien turned to his men. Take care of him. Then he walked past Lena, his face unreadable. As they climbed back up the stairs, she spoke softly. Does it ever end? This war between you and them? Damien stopped halfway, his back to her. It ends when I bury every threat to my family. Hours later, Lena stood by the window of her room, watching the snowfall return. Somewhere out there, people were dying because of choices made inside this house. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to leave. The boy she protected, the man she couldn't stop thinking about. They had become her gravity, pulling her deeper, no matter how much she resisted. A knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, a man in a suit stood there, one she hadn't seen before. He handed her a sealed envelope. Mr. Voss asked me to deliver this, he said. She waited until he left before opening it. Inside was a simple note written in Damien's precise handwriting. You have shown courage when others would have run, but courage has a price. Be ready tomorrow. The truth always demands payment. As she stared at the words, the house seemed to exhale around her. Somewhere deep inside, she understood what the message meant. The storm that had started outside wasn't over. It was only changing shape, and when it returned, it would come for all of them. The next morning broke through the frost, with an eerie quiet that felt like the calm before something dark and unstoppable. The letter from D. Amiens still rested on Lena's nightstand, the black ink burned into her mind. The truth always demands payment. She didn't know what that meant, but the feeling in her stomach told her it would not be something she could forget. Downstairs, the mansion was different. The usual movement of staff had slowed, the air thick with unease. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Even the guards, always stoic, looked uneasy. Mrs. Chen met her at the bottom of the stairs with a nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Voss is waiting for you in the West Wing, she said. He has something to discuss before he leaves. Leaves? Lena asked. Mrs. Chen hesitated. He didn't tell me where. Only that it's dangerous. The West Wing looked nothing like the rest of the house. It was older, darker. Heavy velvet curtains shut out the daylight, and the smell of gun oil lingered faintly in the air. Damien stood near the fireplace, sleeves rolled up, papers scattered across the desk beside a holstered gun. His eyes lifted the moment she entered. You're early, he said. I couldn't sleep, she answered. He nodded as if he already knew that. He motioned to a chair but didn't sit. I'll be away for a few days, he said. There's business to finish. The kind that doesn't wait. You'll stay here with Eli and 2 of my men. No one enters this house without my permission, not even the police. Lena frowned. Police? He met her gaze. Donovan has influence everywhere. If they show up, they're not here to help. She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. He picked up a photograph from the desk and handed it to her. It was of a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, holding a younger Eli in her arms. My wife, he said quietly. They killed her because of me, and if I fail again, they'll come for my son next. For the first time she saw the man behind the reputation. Not the ruthless leader, but a father whose every breath was tied to guilt. She said softly, You won't fail again. He looked at her as if trying to believe it. Then he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. If something happens to me, you take him, and you run. Don't call anyone. Don't look back." Before she could answer, the door opened and one of his guards entered. "Sir, the car's ready." Damien turned to leave, but paused by the doorway. The firelight caught the faint scar on his jaw as he said, "Remember what I told you?" And then he was gone. For the first few hours, the mansion felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. Lena stayed close to Eli, who pretended to study but kept glancing at his phone. He tried to sound casual. "My dad doesn't trust easily, but he trusts you. I've never seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." She didn't know how to respond. Before she could, the sound of tires crunching outside cut through the air. She rushed to the window. A delivery truck had stopped at the gate. Nothing unusual, except the driver wasn't familiar. One of the guards stepped out to check the vehicle. Seconds later, he waved toward the mansion. Then he fell. A single gunshot shattered the morning stillness. Eli jumped to his feet. The other guard shouted orders into his radio, but static answered back. Lena grabbed Eli's hand. "Run!" They bolted down the hallway, the sound of gunfire echoing behind them. The house that once felt like a fortress now felt like a maze built for traps. They ducked into the kitchen, then through a narrow service door that led to the wine cellar. She slammed the door behind them and turned off the light. The silence returned, but this time it was filled with terror. Eli whispered, "They shouldn't know where we are. No one does." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Someone inside does." They hid among the old barrels for what felt like forever until footsteps echoed above them, slow and deliberate. A shadow passed over the cellar stairs. Then a voice, low and familiar, calling, "Led down. Miss Carter, you can come out now." It wasn't Damien's voice. She froze. The voice belonged to the man she'd seen in Damien's study days ago, Michael Donovan. He spoke again, his tone almost playful. "You're good at hiding, I'll give you that. Your boss must value you very much. So much that he left his empire guarded by a nurse. Tell me, did he also tell you about the shipment he stole from me last month, or about the list of names your hands could fetch me?" Eli's hand trembled in hers. She whispered, "Stay quiet, don't move." Donovan's footsteps came closer, slow and echoing. "I only need one of you," he said. "The rest is leverage." Suddenly a loud explosion shook the ground. The lights flickered out. Shouts erupted upstairs. Donovan cursed, retreating toward the front hall. Smoke filled the air, the acrid smell of burning metal drifting down the stairwell. Lena grabbed Eli's arm. Now. They ran through the side tunnel that led toward the garage. The world outside was chaos. One of Damien's cars was on fire, men shouting orders, the crack of gunfire fading into the distance. A figure emerged through the smoke. Damien. His coat was torn, blood on his face, eyes burning with fury. He spotted them and strode forward. Eli ran to him, sobbing in relief. Damien pulled his son close, then looked at Lena. "You did well," he said. "You kept him alive." His voice was rough, but beneath it was gratitude so fierce it made her chest ache. She wanted to ask what happened, but before she could, Damien spoke again. "This isn't over. Donovan just declared war, and this time he's coming for all of us." As the smoke curled into the frozen air, Lena realized that the world she had once lived in no longer existed. She was no longer just a bystander. She was part of the fire now, and in Damien's world, fire never burned out. It only spread. The night after the attack felt endless. Smoke still clung to the walls of the mansion, the scent of gunpowder lingering like a ghost. The security lights outside flickered across the frozen garden, while inside, everything was quiet except for the faint hum of the generator keeping the power alive. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, her hands still shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of what had happened, the gunfire, the explosion, Damien stepping through the smoke like a man carved from war itself. She hadn't seen him since that night. He had locked himself in the study with his most trusted men, and rumors spread through the staff like wildfire. Some said Donovan was dead. Others whispered that he had escaped and was planning something worse. All Lena knew was that the world inside the mansion had shifted again. It was no longer just a place of secrets. It was now a battlefield waiting for its next strike. When the knock finally came, she almost didn't answer, but the moment she opened the door, her breath caught. Damien stood there, the same dark coat, the same sharp eyes, but something in him looked broken. A cut traced the side of his cheek, a bruise shadowed his jaw. For the first time, he looked tired. "Come with me," he said simply. He led her through the long hallway until they reached a door she had never seen open before. Behind it was a staircase descending into darkness. Without a word, he took a torch from the wall and lit it. As they walked, the cold air deepened, the smell of damp stone filling her lungs. When they reached the bottom, she saw it, a hidden underground chamber filled with screens, maps, and documents spread across a steel table. Lines connected faces and locations with red string. It wasn't just a basement. It was a war room. "This is what I've been protecting," Damien said, his voice low but steady. "My family isn't the only one Donovan is after. These are the names of people who refused to work for him, people he killed, and people still left to protect." He turned to her, eyes searching hers. "Now that you're here, you're part of this wit, whether you want it or not." Lena's voice trembled. "Why me? I'm just a nurse." He stepped closer, the torchlight reflecting in his eyes. "Because you saved my son, when I couldn't. You walked into danger without hesitation. That kind of courage can't be taught." Before she could respond, one of the monitors beeped sharply. A red dot blinked on the map near the harbor. Damien's jaw tightened. "That's one of my safe houses," he said. "The guards there are trained to send silent alerts only in extreme situations." He grabbed his coat and holster. "Lena, stay here with Eli." But the words had barely left his mouth when another alarm blared, this time inside the mansion. The sound came from upstairs. A scream followed. Damien spun toward the stairs, pulling his weapon. "Stay behind me," he ordered. They climbed fast, the echo of boots pounding against stone. The hallway was filled with smoke, and through it, Lena saw movement. 2 figures dragging one of the staff members, a guard lying motionless nearby. Damien fired once, the bullet striking clean. The intruder fell. The second man turned, shooting wildly before disappearing into the corridor. Lena crouched beside the fallen staff member. It was Mrs. Chen. Blood soaked her apron, but she was alive. Damien called for his men, his voice like thunder, commanding and cold. "Lock every exit. Sweep every floor. Find him." As the chaos erupted, Lena pressed cloth against Mrs. Chen's wound. Her eyes fluttered open for a second. "It's not over," she whispered. "He's not after Damien anymore. He's after you." The words chilled Lena more than the cold air. She looked up, but Mrs. Chen had already passed out. Damien knelt beside her. What did she say? Lena shook her head quickly. "Nothing. She's delirious." But deep inside she knew it wasn't delirium. Donovan was changing the rules of the game. Hours later, when the mansion was secure again, Damien found Lena in the infirmary, cleaning the blood from her hands. He leaned against the doorway, watching her silently. "You could have left," he said. "No one would have blamed you." She met his gaze. "And leave Eli? Leave you? You think I could do that now?" He stepped closer until the space between them vanished. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You have no idea what you've become to this house. To me." Before she could speak, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened instantly. He turned away. "Donovan's men are moving tonight," he said. "The harbor's a distraction. The real target is the mansion." She stood frozen as he loaded his weapon and signaled his men. When he looked back at her, his eyes were steel again, the softness gone. "Take Eli to the underground vault. Do not come out until I call." The last thing she saw before the door shut behind him was Damien walking into the darkness, his shadow stretching across the marble floor like a man who had already accepted his fate. That night, thunder rolled across the city, and from miles away, flashes of light glowed over the Voss estate. Somewhere in that storm, a choice was being made. The kind of choice that would decide who lived, who died, and whether love could survive a world built on blood and silence. The storm outside had turned the sky into a canvas of fire and lightning. The sound of thunder rolled over the Voss estate like distant artillery. In the underground vault, Lena held Eli close, trying to keep her own fear buried beneath a calm voice, the hum of generators mixed with the faint vibration of gunfire echoing from above. Every few seconds the lights flickered, and each time they did, she imagined Damien alone in the chaos, fighting to keep them safe. Eli clutched her hand. "He's done this before," he whispered, his voice trembling. "When Mom died, he promised he'd never let it happen again." She forced a smile, trying to believe the same lie she told him. Your dad isn't the kind of man who acts promises. But deep inside, she wasn't sure anyone could keep one in a world built on bullets and blood. Suddenly, the door panel of the vault blinked red. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Lena's heart stopped. One of the guards Damien had left behind ran to the control panel, shouting codes into his radio. Static answered. Then the lights went out completely. A second later, a loud metallic thud echoed through the vault. Someone was trying to breach the outer door. Eli's breathing quickened. The guard raised his weapon. "Everyone get back," he ordered. Lena pulled Eli behind one of the steel cabinets. The first explosion came moments later, the shockwave shaking the floor. The second blew the hinges off. Smoke filled the air. Silhouetted in the haze stood 3 armed men. They moved fast and without hesitation. The guard fired, dropping one instantly, but another bullet caught him in the chest. He fell before he could scream. The remaining intruders advanced toward the back of the vault where Lena and Eli were hiding. Lena grabbed the fallen guard's pistol, her hands trembling but her aim steady. She had never fired a gun before, but she remembered Damien's words. Discretion is survival. Fear is death. She waited until one of the men stepped into view. Then she pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and the intruder collapsed. The third man froze, surprised by the sound. Lena fired again, missing this time, but it was enough to make him retreat. The moment his footsteps faded, she grabbed Eli and ran. Through the smoke, she found a small maintenance tunnel Damien had shown her once, a secret escape route hidden behind the power conduits. They crawled through the narrow passage, the sound of shouting echoing behind them. When they emerged into the night, the mansion looked like a war zone. Windows shattered, flames licking at the walls, bodies scattered across the snow. The air smelled of fuel and metal. In the distance, she saw Damien fighting near the main gates, moving like a force of nature, his gun flashing under the lightning. She screamed his name, but the wind swallowed her voice. A figure appeared behind her, grabbing her arm. She swung the pistol up, ready to fire, but the man spoke first. "Easy, Miss Carter," he said. "I'm with him." His name was Ramirez, one of Damien's oldest guards. His face was cut, blood running down his temple, but his eyes were clear. He pointed toward the garage. "We need to move. There's a car waiting. Mr. Voss ordered me to get you and the boy out." Eli shook his head. "I'm not leaving him." Ramirez hesitated, torn. Then the radio on his belt crackled, Damien's voice breaking through the static. "Ramirez, take them. That's an order." They ran through the burning courtyard, ducking behind walls as bullets shattered the night. The car was waiting at the far end, engine running. Lena pushed Eli inside. Ramirez climbed into the driver's seat. As the car sped through the gates, Lena looked back. Through the smoke, she saw Damien surrounded, outnumbered, but still standing. Half an hour later, they stopped at an old warehouse by the docks. It was one of Damien's safe houses, half abandoned, smelling of salt and rust. Ramirez secured the door while Lena checked Eli's glucose levels, her hands shaking too hard to focus. She was barely listening when Ramirez's phone buzzed. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and went pale. "What is it?" she asked. Ramirez's voice was hollow. "They got him. Donovan's men took him alive." Eli stood frozen, eyes wide. "No," he whispered. "You're lying." Ramirez looked away. "He told me if anything happened to keep you both safe. He said he'd find his own way back." Lena sank to the ground, her mind spinning. Damien, captured. The man who never bowed to anyone. The thought seemed impossible. But the reality hit her with the weight of truth. If Donovan had him, the war wasn't just about power anymore. It was personal. She looked at Ramirez, her voice trembling but firm. "Where is he being held?" Ramirez hesitated. "It's suicide, Miss Carter. You don't go near that place." She stepped closer, her eyes fierce now. "I didn't come this far to run. He risked everything to protect us. I won't let him die alone." For a moment, Ramirez said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "The docks. Donovan's headquarters. Midnight exchange. That's all I know. As the wind howled outside, Lena loaded the pistol again with trembling fingers. The nurse who once feared walking home in the dark was gone. In her place stood a woman who had seen too much, lost too much, and was ready to risk everything for the man who had taught her that even in a world of violence, love could still burn bright enough to defy death itself. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the city like a shroud. The war for Damien Voss had just begun, and Lena Carter was about to step into the heart of it. The wind howled across the docks as if the night itself wanted to warn her away. Waves crashed against the concrete walls, spraying icy mist into the air, while the abandoned warehouses stood like dark giants guarding the secrets of the underworld. Lena crouched behind a rusted container, the pistol heavy in her shaking hand. The city lights glimmered faintly in the distance, but here everything was swallowed by darkness and silence. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Every beat whispered the same thought. Damien was somewhere inside. Alive or dead, she didn't know, but she was going to find him. Ramirez had tried to stop her. He had begged her to wait for reinforcements, to think clearly, but she couldn't. Damien had saved her life more than once. He had trusted her with his son, his home, and the truth behind his scars. She owed him more than fear. She owed him her courage. She slipped through the side gate, her steps soundless against the wet ground. 2 guards patrolled the entrance of the main building, their flashlights cutting thin lines through the fog. She waited for the right moment, her body trembling with adrenaline. When one of them turned away, she moved. A swift hit with a steel pipe lying near the wall, a muffled grunt, and he collapsed. The other turned just in time to see her eyes before she struck again. Her arms hurt, her heart raced, but she didn't stop. She had crossed the line between fear and survival. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows. Metal beams stretched toward the ceiling, and the smell of oil and salt filled the air. She could hear voices ahead, low and threatening. She crept closer, hiding behind a stack of crates. Through the narrow space between them, she saw him. Damien, bound to a chair in the center of the room, blood staining the collar of his black shirt, his head lowered but unbroken. Even restrained, he radiated power. The men surrounding him moved carefully, as if aware of the danger in underestimating him. And then she saw Michael Donovan. His smile was calm, his voice smooth like poison. "You built an empire on loyalty, Damien," he said. "But everyone's loyalty has a price. Your men are already switching sides, even the ones guarding your precious house." Damien lifted his head slowly. His eyes were steady, his voice low but cold. "You talk too much for a man who hides behind hired guns." Donovan chuckled. "Words are safer than bullets when the target's tied to a chair." Lena's hands clenched around the gun. She could end this now, she thought. One shot and Donovan would fall, but there were too many guards, too many weapons aimed at Damien. If she missed, it would all be over. She needed a distraction. She spotted a fuel barrel near the wall, half open and leaking. Her mind raced. She reached for a loose cable on the floor, frayed and sparking faintly from exposed wire. One touch of metal to liquid, and the world would explode into chaos. She whispered under her breath, "I'm sorry, Damien." Then she threw the cable. The explosion tore through the warehouse like thunder. Flames erupted, the shockwave knocking her backward. The guards screamed, ducking for cover. Damien fell sideways with the chair as debris rained from the ceiling. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Lena stumbled to her feet, coughing, her ears ringing. Through the haze, she saw Damien struggling to free himself. She ran to him, her fingers cutting against the rope as she pulled at the knots. He looked up, disbelief flashing in his eyes when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. She smiled through tears. "You say that every time I save you." The ropes came loose. He stood, staggering but still dangerous. She handed him a gun she had taken from one of the fallen guards. His grip was firm despite the blood dripping from his wrist. Donovan's voice rose through the smoke. "You think this changes anything, Voss? You'll die for nothing." Damien turned toward the sound, his expression unreadable. Not tonight. The next seconds moved like lightning. Gunfire echoed through the burning warehouse. Donovan's men fell one by one, Damien moving with precision and fury, his every shot deliberate. Lena stayed close, firing when she had to, her fear gone, replaced by something fierce and defiant. The flames climbed higher, swallowing the ceiling beams. Donovan tried to escape through a side door, but Damien caught him halfway. They stood face to face, two men who had built their lives on control and violence. Damien raised his gun. "This is for my wife," he said quietly. The shot echoed louder than the storm outside. Donovan fell, his body collapsing into the firelight. When it was finally over, Damien turned to Lena. His face was streaked with blood and soot, but his eyes held something new. Gratitude, awe, maybe even lows. V. She reached out, touching his arm. "We have to go," she said. He nodded. Together they ran into the night as the warehouse behind them collapsed in a roar of flames. Outside, the cold air hit like a slap. The harbor lights reflected off the black water. Damien leaned against a railing, his body shaking with exhaustion. She stood beside him, both of them breathing hard. "You should have stayed away," he said softly. She smiled. "You know I never do what I'm told." He looked at her then, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "You walked into hell for me." She met his gaze. "No, Damien. I walked into hell with you." In the distance, sirens wailed, but neither of them moved. The war that had nearly destroyed them was finally over, yet they both knew something deeper had begun. The world around them was burning, but for the first time since the night she found his son in the snow, Lena didn't feel afraid. She felt alive. The morning after the fire smelled of smoke and salt. The city was quiet again, but the dock still burned like dying embers, refusing to go out. News had already begun to spread, stories whispered through alleys and boardrooms about the fall of Michael Donovan and the end of a shadow war that had ruled the city for years. But none of those stories mentioned Lena Carter. None spoke of the woman who had walked into the heart of danger for a man the world feared. She woke in a safe house miles from the city, the faint sound of the ocean outside the window. Her body ached from exhaustion, and her palms were bruised where the rope had cut into them, but she was alive. When she turned, Damien was there, sitting near the window, his arm bandaged, his face marked with faint burns. He was watching the horizon, silent and unreadable. The morning light touched the scars on his face, making him look both human and untouchable at once. He didn't turn when he spoke. Donovan's dead, but his empire isn't. Men like him don't die without leaving pieces of themselves behind. His eyes flicked to her. "And you, Lena, you've seen too much to ever go besides he ain't." She sat up slowly. "So that's it?" she asked. "I saved your life, and now I disappear." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stood and crossed the room, his presence filling the air like storm clouds. He stopped just in front of her. "I don't want you to disappear. That's the problem." His honesty caught her off guard. For months she had watched him command men with nothing more than a glance, had seen fear bend before him like wind through glass. But now, standing here, he looked almost uncertain. His voice dropped lower. "I built my life on control, on never needing anyone. Then you walked into it, and everything I thought was unshakable started to move." She rose to meet his gaze. "You think I asked for this? You think I wanted to love a man who lives in a world that kills anything soft?" He flinched slightly, as if her words hit a truth he had tried to avoid. She stepped closer. "You can bury the name Donovan, burn every building he owned, but as long as you live like a ghost, you'll keep losing everything that's real." The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy. Then he reached out, his hand trembling just slightly, and touched her face. For once his touch wasn't command or control. It was an apology. "You should have been miles from this life, Lena. You saved my son. You saved me. And I dragged you into a war you never deserved." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "I didn't save you out of pity. I did it because I saw something worth saving. Even in the darkest place, I saw a man still capable of light." He laughed softly, the sound rough but real. "Light," he repeated. "Maybe I started seeing it too." Before she could answer, the door burst open. Ramirez entered, breathless. "Sir, we have a problem." A convoy was hit on the south road. It wasn't Donovan's people. Someone else is moving in. Damien's expression hardened instantly. He turned to Lena. I hear." "No," she said. "You're not leaving me behind again." Ramirez hesitated. "Sir, we don't have time." Damien's jaw tightened, but finally he nodded. "Then stay close," he said, "and don't stop moving." They drove fast toward the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with fog, the kind that made every shadow look alive. When they reached the crash site, smoke rose from 2 burning vehicles. Bodies lay scattered across the asphalt. Damien stepped out first, gun drawn. Lena followed cautiously, her heart pounding. The smell of gasoline was sharp in the cold air. Ramirez crouched beside one of the fallen men. "These aren't Donovans," he said. "They're mercenaries. No insignia, no code." Then a phone buzzed on the ground beside one of the bodies. Damien picked it up. A single message flashed on the screen. "The game isn't over. You took one king. Another rises." He stared at the message for a long moment, then crushed the phone in his fist. Lena could see the storm returning to his eyes, the one she had thought might finally be over. She touched his arm gently. "If this is another war, then we face it together." He looked at her, the cold fury in his gaze softening. "No more wars," he said quietly. "Not like this. I'm done fighting for power. It's time I start fighting for peace." Weeks later, the mansion was rebuilt, its broken glass replaced, its halls no longer echoing with fear. Eli smiled again, and the staff walked without glancing over their shoulders. But the biggest change wasn't in the walls. It was in Damien. He had begun selling off his darker holdings, turning his empire into something legitimate, something his son could inherit without shame. One evening, as the snow began to fall again, Lena found him standing outside on the terrace. The wind carried the faint sound of the city below, but here everything felt still. She walked to him, her breath visible in the cold air. "You kept your promise," she said. He looked at her with a quiet smile. "I only kept it because of you." For a while they stood in silence, watching the snow settle on the garden. The same snow that had once hidden a frightened boy on a freezing street, the same snow that had changed both their lives forever. Lena slipped her hand into his, and he didn't pull away. The darkness that had once ruled his world was still there, but it no longer owned him. She looked up at him and whispered, "The night I found your son, I thought I was saving a stranger. But now, I know I was saving us all." Damien squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe you were," he said. And as the snow fell heavier, blanketing the world in white, the man who once ruled through fear and the woman who taught him to feel finally stood side by side, not as protector and nurse, but as 2 souls who had fought their way through fire and found something stronger than power. They found peace. And for the first time in years, Damien Voss smiled like a man who finally understood what it meant to be free.